All right, welcome back to the Explainer. So I want you to picture this with me. The year is 634 CE. We're exactly 13 years after the Hijra. The Arabian Peninsula is completely united, and this rapidly expanding Islamic state, well, it's basically poised to completely reshape the ancient world. And right at this absolutely critical juncture, a new leader takes the wheel, Umar ibn al-Khattab. In today's Explainer, we're going to unpack the 10-year rule of Islam's second caliph and really look at how his incredibly unique character forged what a lot of historians consider a literal golden era of justice. Okay, let's just dive right into the core paradox of Umar's entire 10-year caliphate. Just ask yourself, what kind of man conquers the ancient world but sleeps in the dirt? I mean, usually when a leader's territory expands, their personal luxury expands right along with it, right? It's human nature. But as we look at the source material, Umar was the exact opposite of that standard. Now, look at the staggering contrast here. On the one hand, you've got this vast empire, Arabia, the Levant, Egypt, Persia. We're talking immense wealth and tens of millions of people. Yet the absolute ruler of this massive territory owned, well, almost nothing. His personal inventory was literally limited to patched-up clothes, a single camel, and a super basic diet of just dates and olive oil. And the craziest part? This wasn't some political performance. It was a genuine, extreme frugality. Part 1. The Emperor in Patched Clothes. To really understand the man, you have to understand his title, Al-Faruq. That translates to the Distinguisher. This was actually a title given to him by the Prophet, highlighting his extraordinary ability to just decisively cleave apart truth from falsehood. No compromises. And this profound moral clarity, it basically defined his entire existence. From his dramatic, public conversion right down to his total refusal to compromise on matters of principle, Omar's leadership was rooted in an absolute zero-tolerance policy for ambiguity when it came to right and wrong. And you know, that uncompromising nature is exactly why his predecessor, Abu Bakr, carefully engineered this succession plan. Abu Bakr consulted the senior companions, explicitly addressed their worries about Umar's perceived harshness, recorded a formal written nomination, and secured a really smooth pledge of allegiance from the community. It was a brilliant move, actually. Abu Bakr realized that Umar's strictness was the perfect counterbalance to his own gentleness. He knew that once the full, heavy weight of leadership fell on Umar's shoulders, his deep sense of justice would naturally tone down that severity. Section 2. Radical Personal Accountability. Just listen to the standard he set for himself. If a mule stumbled in Iraq, I would hold myself personally answerable before Allah. I mean, let the sheer scale of that sink in for a second. Iraq was a distant province, thousands of miles away, yet he felt personally responsible for its road maintenance. And again, the historical texts make it clear, this wasn't just some clever political talking point. This was a deep, genuine religious fear that he'd be judged for any failure of his government, no matter how small, no matter how far away. This right here is management by walking around, centuries before it was ever a corporate buzzword. Omar completely bypassed filtered official reports by going on secret night patrols. There's this one really famous account where he found a desperate mother boiling stones, literally boiling stones, just to create the illusion of making food so her starving kids would fall asleep. And what did the ruler of the world's largest empire do? He didn't send an assistant or a deputy. He went straight to the treasury, personally hoisted a massive sack of flour onto his own back, and delivered it to her himself. And of course, he demanded that exact same radical accountability from his administration. Before he'd even appoint a governor, Umar ordered a full inventory of their wealth. If they got mysteriously rich while in office, they had to return it, period. He gave them explicit orders to serve the people, not rule them. And he gave citizens direct access to complain. Amazingly, in disputes, the presumption actually favored the citizen over the governor. He even stood as an ordinary litigant in court himself, flat out refusing any preferential treatment. Section 3. Architect of an Empire. Because governing all these newly conquered territories, it required entirely new state machinery. So he organized provinces, set up regular record-keeping, and, this is absolutely crucial, he separated military from civilian administration. This was a massive, game-changing innovation because it stopped local generals from just accumulating unchecked power. He also created the independent office of the judge, or qadi, because he recognized that true justice means the courts have to be completely free from executive interference. And then there was the Diwan. Guys, this is a massive historical milestone. The Diwan was effectively the world's first systematically organized state welfare system. Just think about how groundbreaking that is for the 7th century. We're not talking about random, occasional charity here. This was a pioneering, highly structured administrative framework. It was funded by central treasury revenues and provided regular stipends to meet the basic needs of registered families. It completely transformed how a state viewed its financial obligation to its citizens. This organizational genius also built Islamic historical consciousness. Before Umar, dating methods were kind of all over the place, totally inconsistent. But as the bureaucracy grew, they desperately needed a standard. And interestingly, he didn't choose the prophet's birth or the first revelation. He deliberately chose the Hijra, that migration in 622 CE, as the foundational starting point. By standardizing this into a 12-month lunar calendar, he anchored the community's timekeeping in their own definitive transition to political independence. And he had to build all these institutions at lightning speed, because the empire was just exploding. I mean, in a single decade, the mighty Sassanid Persian Empire was decisively defeated at Al-Qadisiyah. The Byzantine Levant was secured after the monumental Battle of Yarmouk, and the incredibly wealthy strategic territory of Egypt was rapidly conquered. These sweeping, rapid-fire expansions completely transformed the political, cultural, and geographic landscape of the ancient world in just 10 years. Now, with all these diverse new populations came new legal frameworks, specifically the concept of the dhimmi. These were non-Muslim subjects who were granted protection of their lives, their property, and their religious practices in exchange for a poll tax called the jizya, which actually exempted them from military service. The historical texts point out that this framework allowed Christians, Jews, and Zoroastrians to maintain self-governance and keep their existing religious structures perfectly intact. It offered a level of practical religious coexistence that was pretty incredible for that era. Section 4. The Conqueror on Foot. Once again, I want you to imagine the historical norm here. How does the ruler of the world's largest empire typically enter a newly conquered city? I mean, you'd probably expect grand processions, maybe some gold chariots, trumpets, and just this terrifying display of military might to subdue the locals, right? But here is the stunning historical reality. Umar entered Jerusalem on foot, leading the camel, while his servant rode. They had literally traveled all the way from Medina to Jerusalem, sharing a single camel, taking turns riding. And when they finally reached the city gates, well, it just simply happened to be the servant's turn to ride. And Umar flat out refused to switch just to look more impressive to the locals. He insisted that his dignity came from his faith, not from some flashy royal display. The treaty he signed there, known as the Covenant of Umar, guaranteed the safety of the residents, their properties, and heavily protected their churches. There's this really beautiful detail from the sources. When Patriarch Sophronius actually invited Umar to pray inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Umar politely refused. Why? Because he knew that if he prayed there, future generations of Muslims might use it as an excuse to convert the church into a mosque. It was a total masterclass in foresight and religious tolerance, making sure it remained a protected Christian holy site forever. Section 5. Timeless Lessons in Leadership. The final days of Omar's caliphate were brought on by a sudden, shocking act of violence. He was assassinated during the dawn Fajr prayer by a man named Abu Lulua. Yet even while he was fatally wounded, Omar's focus remained entirely on the community. He immediately set up a 6-man shura council to ensure a democratic, smooth selection for his successor. And then, in a final act of really profound humility, he didn't demand some grand royal tomb. Instead, he sent a messenger to Aisha, politely asking for her permission to be buried alongside his 2 greatest companions, the Prophet and Abu Bakr. So when we synthesize the massive scale of his 10-year rule, we're left with these absolutely core takeaways. Number 1, authority is a strict trust, never a privilege. Number 2, leaders cannot be insulated. They literally must know the lived reality of their people. 3, accountability can't just rely on good intentions. It has to be institutionalized. And finally, true legacy comes from the quality of justice you uphold, not the wealth or power you happen to acquire. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to chew on. If a man who ruled millions of people left behind nothing but patched clothes and a legacy of unmatched justice, what kind of legacy are you building with the authority and resources you have in your own life? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. It's been a blast. Be sure to tune in next time, because we are going to take a massive deep dive into the specific historical and strategic details of the Persian and Jerusalem conquests. See you then.